Welcome to this Ask the Expert session at Ignite. Don't lose sleep over insider risks, using the power of machine learning to identify and reduce your risk today. As we get started, first of all, welcome. This is a live session with a panel of experts available to answer your questions. Use the chat, the Q&A function as part of this session to ask your questions. Your questions will appear to all the attendees once the moderator has approved it. If you like other people's questions, upvote them so that we can see that multiple people have the same question. We're probably not going to have the chance to get to all the questions during this session, but definitely ask your questions. We're going to answer what we can. And we've also got live moderators standing by to provide text answers for those that we can't answer live on air. A couple of quick notes. This session does have certain etiquette. Look, it's being recorded. Please help the moderators by not spamming or repeating a question to the extent that you have. The Microsoft Code of Conduct does apply to this session, so we just ask you to please attend the session complying with the Code of Conduct. And with that, let's meet our experts. Kevin, would you get us started?
Yes. Hi, everybody. My name is Kevin Kirkpatrick. I'm a senior customer engineer, and I am a compliance readiness lead as well. That's been a part of creating a couple of very recent learning paths.
And Senkau.
Thanks, Wayne. Hey, everyone. I'm Sankalp. I'm a program manager for communication and compliance, a very exciting tool in Insider Risk.
Fantastic. Abbas.
Hey everyone, this is Abbas Kudrati. I'm a Chief Security Advisor for Microsoft Asia based in Melbourne, Australia.
Excellent. And Shinji.
Hi, Taro. This is Shinji Kobayashi. I'm a technical specialist as well as a global black belt located in Tokyo, Japan.
Excellent. And I am your moderator today, Wayne Anderson. I am a security and compliance architect with the Microsoft 365 Center of Excellence. And with that, Shinji, I'd love to start with you first. You know, there are many factors that organizations are trying to balance today when using insider risk, right? They have to balance privacy versus security. Can you share some of your thoughts about the strategy of using insider risk? What are the types of things that organizations are trying to target with insider risk in the organization?
Yeah, so I talk with many customers and do the presentations also, and you know, so we are shifting to the new era of the remote work, right? So we have a remote harassment as well, right? So two things customer has a concern about. So one is new insider risk in a remote work era. So the other thing is still they are concerned very much on information leakage. Especially the sensitive information or personal information leakage from the companies to the outside.
Fantastic. You know, Kevin, so an organization realizes that they'd like to use insider risk or they think maybe it's a good fit. Testing out a product like this is very difficult, or at least it seems difficult to our customers because they need data. They have to experience the process. They have to figure out how does this fit in their organization. So, how would they do a proof of concept for insider risk?
Thanks, Wayne. This is something we actually do get quite a bit, and that's a great question. For one thing, definitely I can commiserate that, when you have let's say you have a test tenant or a different test environment, you wanting to go through and be able to play around with the solution, get an idea of what generates risks. Some of the things I would recommend is to take a look at things like we do have DLP violations where we could actually set up policies where we could trigger a lot of downloads of a file with credit card numbers and such, and we can set up or fake credit card numbers that you can generate. And you can test a major download of this to kind of try to generate risks in your environment. Same thing that if you actually go through and set up a HR connector in a test environment, or you have a test user, you can actually send in fake HR events in a way about someone's having leaving the company. On top of that, though, I hear, Wayne, that we have a compliance workshop as well that's really built for being able to see the value of this in an environment.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up. The compliance workshop does provide the opportunity to get Microsoft field teams or one of Microsoft's partners that works in the compliance space to work with you, evaluate the environment, look at real production data by deploying a trial into the environment, and target a specific set of users to be able to test out the features with real information, real users. Speaking of which, Abbas, one of the things that we're hearing from customers during Ignite is, hey, look, insider risk looks interesting. I think it could be a fit, but I'm also concerned that my user population is going to have some privacy concerns about that. How can an organization be sensitive to privacy while also looking for insider risk in the environment?
Great question, Van. I do recall in one of my previous organizations where I was trying to monitor the browsing pattern of our employee using our web application firewall, and I was asked by our HR team and legal team not to do that because the policy was not as up to date with the current requirement that we can do monitoring of our employee. So it really goes back to first, as an organization policy, you might have to update that and take authorizations or concurrent from all the employee saying that monitoring is part of our business and we will go to monitor it. And accordingly, once that particular thing has been aware by all the employee, and then you can implement something like this as an insider risk management, which can help you in allowing the right people to access the right amount of information. As we say it, need to know and need to do basis. Not everyone can look at all the data as a part of your solution. It has to be part of your maybe a legal team or a compliance team or a privacy team who has the right access towards that. So it all goes back to the policy and access control.
Fantastic. So as you're working through that balance, one of the interesting things is organizations are dealing with users in many geographies, many different jurisdictions. And one of the questions that comes out of that is, my user population speaks languages other than English. Senkalp, when we look at communication compliance in particular, we're looking for violations of code of conducts, and language becomes important. First of all, what languages are supported? And second, what advice would you give to an organization for kind of navigating languages in deployments today?
Thanks, Wayne, for this question. That's a wonderful question. So V1 of the product of communication compliance supported just English language, but V2 of the product that we're working on and as a part of Ignite we announced, we are supporting languages which have double byte characters. What does that mean? Languages like Japanese, French, Spanish, etc. So all the tier 1 languages after English are going to get supported by communication compliance.
Okay. As they're looking at deploying communication compliance, what are some of the communication channels that are being supervised in the communication compliance product?
That's another good question. So V1 of the product, we were focused on Microsoft workloads like Teams, Exchange, Yammer, Skype for Business. But we are aware that not all the organizations use just these communication channels. There are a lot of channels like Slacks and Zooms of the world. So with Ignite, we are pushing the boundaries, and now with the help of third-party connectors, we can support channels like Slack, Zoom, WebEx, etc. So right now, the list of channels that is being supported is 20, but by the end of Iron, it will be more than 40.
Okay, fantastic. It's great to see the growth and the product capability and the applicability in the enterprise. Abbas, when I think about kind of the workflow here and more languages being used, there's a progression, right? And that progression from kind of recognizing risk conditions, investigating it, dealing with it, it all kind of loops up to the dashboard for the product. Who in the organization is going to be interested in the information that's being presented by the Insider Risk Management dashboard?
Yep. So we keep saying the word risk as a part of it, right? So I give you my own experience. Prior to joining Microsoft, I used to be a CISO for a large company, and I had a requirement of checking if my employees are by mistake, knowingly or unknowingly, leaking the data or taking it into their hard drive or the USB drive. So one such audience is, I want, as a CISO, I need to have visibility that what's my current usage of download, upload towards the cloud, or any mass download or upload on the USB itself. So that could be one such audience, CISO team or a security analyst team who are doing the continuous monitoring. A second request I used to get continuously from our HR and legal team when somebody is resigning, they used to flag me that, hey, Abbas, so and so person has resigned and going to a competitor. Can you keep an eye on them? So it used to be on request basis, but they are one such audience that who can trigger such request or maybe have a dashboard on their side as well. So they can take either a legal or a HR steps for that particular use case or an employee. So, and if you have an enterprise risk management team, they would like to look at it from the risk profiling or a risk reporting point of view. That could be the third audience as well, in my opinion.
Understood. Kevin, as we look at some of the technical underpinnings of what creates these alerts, what provides this insight to the organization, can you talk a little bit about how the classifiers work in insider risk and communication compliance, right? How does it bring these insights together and actually get to the point where it can alert that something's happening?
Absolutely, and this is such a great point because it's something I've been so excited for some of the capabilities that we're coming out with now. We've had two really major types of classifiers in the past. We have something called sensitive information types, and generally that's where we can do a specific keyword match, like look for a credit card number type, or look for a specific set of words or a certain phrase like project Contoso or something of that nature. And then where the real magic happens in our products like communication compliance and insider risk management is where we can start to leverage our machine learning with, I forgot the name. What is the name of our classifiers? Machine learning. Wait.
Classifier, auto classifier.
Classifier.
Yeah, machine. Yeah, classifiers. Yeah. Anyway, sorry. I don't know why I blanked on that for a second. But the really neat part about this, right, is this now we can actually go through and capture based off of our message intent. So if you're thinking about it, if I'm using harmful language where none of the words are a negative word, we can put together a phrase that would something that would be use extreme harm, and using any sort of classic pattern matching utility, you wouldn't see that risk in your environment. So this is one of the biggest things here that helps promote this and really lets us be able to look for things like harm intent and be able to go through and create something like our communications compliance or our insider risk management policies based off of this.
Understood. It's interesting because we're bringing together a lot of these indicators from audit information, and then we're enriching them with indicators from around the environment, HR connectors and ATP and things like that. In the customer meetings that we've had in the last couple days on insider risk, particularly, one of the questions we keep hearing over and over and over, Kevin, is, do I have to have Defender ATP deployed in my environment in order to use insider risk?
That's a great question. There are benefits sometimes to having Defender ATP, but it is definitely not a requirement. And we actually, I believe, call this now Defender for Endpoint. The benefits there is that we can go through and using this engine, we can go through and detect things on the device itself. So if you have an event like you're copying a file off to a USB, using Microsoft Defender, we can actually go through and detect that signal happening on the device, bring that up into Insider Risk Management, and be able to trigger, add that as a signal into detecting a risky event that happens on the endpoint. This does require Windows 1809 plus. However, that is not required for insider risk management to work. There's a lot of signals that we can actually gather to still show risk. HR signals, right? When someone's leaving in an organization, that's when they're most likely to commit something like IP theft, which happens all the time. So that's essentially, it can help, but it will not stop you from being able to use insider risk management.
Okay, wonderful. You know, as I think a little bit more about the strategy, about where you're going to apply these products, one of the really interesting things is the marketplace has more requirements than ever to go out and do business. It's not just about you know, protecting necessarily IP that sits in the organization. It's also about protecting the way that employees work with each other. Shinji, I'd love to learn a little bit more about how customers are using or investigating communication compliance in the Japanese market. What are the types of things customers are using communication compliance to protect against?
Yeah, in my country, so communication compliance is used in many ways. So number one is the harassment, right? Including the power harassment, so also the sexual harassment or something. So in you know, so remote areas, we kind of such a, you know, harassment happen in the communications frequently in my country, unfortunately. And also the customer can upload the word or dictionary to the communication compliance. So that's the reason why they leverage the communication compliance for the different usage or different purposes, including the, you know, fake quality assurance, also the, you know, cartel or kickback or such things. So customer creates dictionaries and creates a policy accordingly, respectively, and upload to the communication compliance and detect such, you know, violations of the code of conduct in the communications.
I see. You know, Sankalp, when we take a step back and we look at some of the other markets, especially throughout the Asia Pacific region, you know, are there other use cases for communication compliance that either we're targeting today or we're looking to target in the near future?
Yeah. So one of the important use case for communication compliance is regulation compliance. So a lot of companies, especially in finance, BFSI area, where the financial regulations have mandate the communication of the employees to be supervised. That's one big area for us. Another new emerging area that we are seeing is because of the COVID, the whole entire education is going online. And education sector, schools and universities is another area where they don't want students to use profane language or threat or harass someone. So school education and university education is another new area for us, which we have seen a huge usage in commercial compliance.
I see. You know, it raises the question about kind of where to apply insider risk and communication compliance. And, you know, Abbas, as you're thinking about customers, you're thinking about different verticals where you're acting as an executive security advisors to customers today. Where are some of the places that it's going to be most applicable to helping our customers protect their business?
I think every organization this will apply, because we consider data as a new crown jewel or data as a new fuel. But the most importantly, those who are dealing with the sensitive or a classified data, such as could be the university who has the research data, could be the banking environment who had the financial data or the investment data of their top premium customer, could be the consulting company who are dealing with audit reports and many other sensitive data which they collect as a part of their business model. So in my opinion, it goes every vertical. Everyone, as we said in the research, right, insider risk is the topmost concern for every CISO today. So it applies to all sectors and all verticals.
I see. You know, it's a fantastic capability, whether you're in financial services or banking or healthcare. You know, are there any examples that just kind of come to mind where you've seen maybe areas of particular risk in one of these businesses where you've turned around and you've said to a customer, hey, look, you really should look at insider risk for this?
I'll give you my own example in one of the previous company where I used to work, where our company was involved in doing the research and not research, but project work for the Department of Defense. And Department of Defense had a very strict in terms of guideline how the security should be managed. And if something goes leaked, I had to inform them immediately, and the consequence could be millions of dollars of fine. So in such case, I was doing very active monitoring for all the people who were involved in that particular project, including their USB access, file upload, email sent, and I was using all those point solution or within my SIM and trying to get out of the data on that. So a good example is, yes, when you are dealing with the sensitive data and you are bound by those compliant regulatory or the vendor contract lock-in where you are supposed to, if something goes wrong, you have to pay a heavy fine. Could be on GDPR, could be on HIPAA side as well. So lots of example I've seen as a part of my role.
Excellent. So when a customer, has identified that they've got a problem that insider risk management can help them address, Kevin, we've got a number of customers that are starting to take implementation steps, or they're, a significant amount of time into doing an implementation. What are some of the things that really kind of jump out at you as maybe tips or practices, challenges that you would highlight to customers that are considering insider risk, or they're just getting ready to do implementation?
Yeah, so number one, I would say it's important to kind of know where this fits. I do find that customers have a difficult time understanding, where does the solution fit in the stack and how is it related to the rest of our components. And for this, I like to remind that, like, hey, inside, we have, as we kind of mentioned a little bit earlier, some really interesting technologies coming around with endpoint DLP or HR data connectors or setting up data loss prevention policies that really all enhance the value of insider risk management. This is really meant to take the complex set of signals that we have around an entire organization and to summarize it so that at the end of the day, we can determine, is this a risk or not necessarily looking around and having to say, well, if I go through and first I see a DLP event and then I see an HR event and then I see this. We don't have to figure that out. We can use the artificial intelligence on the back end, and this is where these algorithms really shine. So that's something that I think that very often I find is our biggest problem, is that people have a hard time initially wrapping their head around where it actually fits. However, I think for getting the other little thing I'd like to kind of promote with getting started, we have a heck of a lot of resources here on just how we can start to deploy each of these things. We've got some great documentation on how do we set up an HR data connector, how do we set up data loss prevention policies, and we have a learning path as well that'll go through and give you, I can promote my own learning path here, but we have a learning path that'll go through and give you a start to end guidance on how to get started. So I find people just feeling, hey, I just don't know enough about this on how to get started. So
excellent. Sankalp, I'd love to go back to you for a question that we're getting on privacy. For communication compliance, how are we addressing the kind of more expanded privacy concerns where someone could potentially read content, right? I mean, they have to look at the messages, they have to look at the attachments in order to make a good decision. Is this a problem in my organization or not?
Yeah, Ben, that's a very good question. So the problem is access to the content. So what we have done is we have provided granular role-based access. Not everyone who has access to community compliance can see the content. So we have 4 roles for very specifically defined tasks, and they can perform only those tasks. Only one of the role has access to read the actual message or the content. Second, what we are doing is we are using pseudonymization, where we anonymize the name of the employee. So while investigating, you don't have any bias against anyone, whether it's a VP of the company or a low-level employee. So the investigation remains unbiased when you don't know who you are investigating. So these two features help us in addressing the privacy concern that most of the organizations have.
Excellent. Excellent. Joining us right now is Tala Mir, Principal Program Manager for Insider Risk Management. And Tala, one of the interesting experiences here at Microsoft is this is a product that came from our own experience, protecting ourselves, protecting our data, protecting our customers who depend on us to operate well on trust. Along the way, we learned a number of lessons about how to do insider risk management well. Some of the things that maybe didn't work as well at first that we tried, and some things that we had to learn as we deployed at scale. Can you share maybe a key top 1 or 2 lessons for using, deploying, configuring insider risk in the organization?
Yeah, that's a great question, Wayne. I appreciate you taking that up. So I think there's 2 big learnings that we had that we really try to bake into the product as well. And I want to piggyback on top of something that Kevin was talking about at the tail end. So one, it's a large, complicated problem. There's a lot going on. It's like a sea of different types of risks, right? When you look at sabotage and theft and data leak and physical and digital realm stuff. So the very first thing is you don't try to boil the ocean. You have to try to compartmentalize the problems and focus on risks that you can actually sort of tractable and you can actually solve properly and effectively. And that's one of the first things that we sort of bake into the product, right? There's this idea of being very templatized and focused on specific types of risks like data theft by departing employee or data leak or sabotage and things like that. The second big learning that we had that, again, we baked into the product is this idea that unlike traditional security, where a malware is a piece of malware is a piece of malware, right? It doesn't matter what part of the world it might originate from, what vertical you're in that it might be impacting you. You can identify it, define a signature for it, detect it, and contain it. Insider risks are very context specific, right? So the types of sequence of activities you might detect for one organization, it may be completely within their risk threshold and they'll say, I'm fine with it. Where somebody else, they might say, this is completely unacceptable. And to make that trade-off, to make that determination on what is and is not acceptable, requires that deep, connected sort of collaboration across security, business, legal, and HR. So those, I'd say, 2 key learnings out of that. Don't try to boil the ocean, kind of break it up into pieces you can tackle. And the second, you have to take collaboration into account when you set up these programs. And both of those things we baked into the DNA of our insider risk management solutions.
Fantastic. One of the interesting things about insider risk management is we've seen the capability of insider risk really expand very quickly, going from taking a limited set of signals that are primarily Microsoft 365 to taking more opportunity to be enriched by Defender in the environment, HR connectors, things like that. What are the next couple of steps in the connector path that customers should be looking for, for the vibrance and the continued expansion, maturity of the capability in the product?
A great question, Wayne. So there's sort of a 2-pronged strategy that we have in the product, right? So one is definitely the connector approach, right? So we have the HR connector through which you can bring in termination data, you can bring in sentiment data, you can bring disgruntlement data. And then the second is the physical badging connector that we just announced yesterday. That's you can start to now bridge the digital and the physical world together to bring the full view of what the user is up to. But the second strategy is really getting a full view of what's happening on the endpoint, right? So when you want to understand the breadth and depth of what somebody's activity may be, you want to get closer to that user and their activity, which is on the endpoint itself. So we started with this back in Inspire timeframe, where we announced the fact that we have an agentless ability. There's no dependency on anything other than Windows 10. And through that, we can capture signals coming from the Edge browser, coming from the endpoint, exfiltration, infiltration, obfuscation type activity, regardless of what third-party or first-party sites you might be visiting.
Fantastic. So with that, we're running out of time. A few things that offer next steps for insider risk. The first thing is get familiar with the insider risk documentation that's available to you. It's being updated regularly as the product evolves. There's a new insider risk learning path. aka.ms/insiderrisklp. This is free training that'll take you step by step through the basics. of getting to use insider risk. We also have learning zone sessions from Ignite, which you can look at the replay, or you can sign up for the Europe time zone aligned session that's coming up later today. Finally, for testing out this product in your own environment, you can use an E5 trial to evaluate insider risk for a fit for your organization. Thank you for joining us in this Ask the Expert session, and enjoy Ignite.